The coast of Washington state is a place where the world feels ancient and unfinished. Here, colossal pine and cedar trees, draped in beards of moss, stand as silent witnesses to centuries of rain and mist. The cold, powerful Pacific Ocean relentlessly carves the shoreline, its roar a constant, distant companion. It was in this wild, beautiful place that Dr. Anita Sharma found her life's work. She wasn't interested in the grand, roaring ocean, but in its quiet, forgotten pockets. Her focus was a place that didn't officially exist on any map, a small, perfectly circular lagoon, hidden more than a mile inland, fed by a subterranean spring and completely cut off from the sea. The locals, the few who knew of it, called it the Glimmerwood. The name was fitting. The lagoon's water was unnaturally warm for this climate, and it was home to a unique species of bioluminescent algae that, on the darkest nights, would fill the entire lagoon with a soft, ethereal, blue-green light. For months, Anita's research was a peaceful, methodical routine. She cataloged the unique flora, analyzed the water's strange mineral composition, and spent her nights simply watching, mesmerized by the silent, shimmering light show. It was a perfect, self-contained ecosystem, a biological jewel box. And then it began to whisper. It started as a low-frequency vibration she picked up on her sensitive hydrophones, equipment she'd placed at the lagoon's center to monitor geological activity. It was a deep, rhythmic pulse, slower than a human heartbeat, far too regular for any known marine mammal. It wasn't geological either. Earthquakes and tremors were chaotic, violent. This was a gentle, complex, and undeniably organic sound. It felt intentional. One moonless night, as the Glimmerwood glowed with unusual intensity, the whisper was stronger than ever. It was no longer just a blip on her screen. She could feel the vibration through the soles of her boots as she stood on the soft, mossy bank. A deep, profound curiosity, the very thing that had driven her into science, took hold. She had to see the source. She launched her small, remotely operated submersible, the Stingray, a device the size of a shoebox equipped with a high-resolution camera and a powerful light. She guided it from her laptop, watching the screen as the submersible descended into the glowing emerald water. The algae parted before the camera, creating a tunnel of soft light. 10 feet down, 20, 50. The bottom of the lagoon was sandy and clear, but the whisper grew stronger, the vibrations now shaking the submersible's camera slightly. She piloted the Stingray toward the center of the lagoon, where the sound was most intense. At first, she saw nothing but sand. Then she noticed that the sand was not flat. It rose in a gentle, perfectly formed mound. As she moved the submersible closer, its light cutting through the glowing water, she realized it wasn't a mound of sand at all. It was the exposed curve of something immense, something half-buried. The surface wasn't rock or metal. It was a dark, organic texture, like the skin of a whale, but it was patterned with faint geometric lines that pulsed with a soft, internal light, perfectly in time with the deep, slow whisper. She was not looking at an object or a vessel. She was looking at the back of a living, breathing, and impossibly large creature that was sleeping at the bottom of her secret lagoon. Anita sat on the bank, her face pale in the glow of the laptop screen. The world she knew, a world of measurable data, of biological classifications and rational explanations, was dissolving into the soft emerald light of the lagoon. She replayed the Stingray's camera footage over and over, trying to find a flaw, a glitch, that could explain what she was seeing. But the image was crystal clear. A vast, serene, living thing was sleeping beneath the water, its slow, rhythmic respiration the very whisper she had been studying for weeks. She carefully retrieved the stingray, her hand trembling. Her first instinct, the scientist's instinct, was to make a call to her professor, to the institute, to anyone. A discovery of this magnitude was too big for one person. But something held her back. This didn't feel like just a scientific find. It felt like something else, something deeply personal. The creature did not seem threatening. On the contrary, its presence radiated a sense of profound, ancient peace. To announce its existence would be to invite the world's attention, an attention that Anita instinctively felt could be destructive. Over the next few days, Anita shifted from a researcher to a watcher. She didn't dare send the stingray back down, afraid to disturb the sleeping giant. Instead, she sat on the bank for hours at a time, staring into the shimmering water, listening to the whisper through her hydrophones. She began to notice the patterns. The pulse wasn't monotonous. It would modulate, grow in complexity, at times almost resembling a melody. And then the images began. At first, they were faint, like the traces of a dream upon waking. When she closed her eyes, listening to the whisper, she would see flashes of colors she had never seen in nature, feel the sensation of swimming in warm, boundless oceans under the light of two suns. She dismissed it as imagination, fatigue, self-hypnosis. But the images grew clearer, more coherent. She saw vast cities built not of metal or stone, but of living, glowing coral. She felt the sensation of communicating, not with words, but with pure emotion and color, in a society where all were part of a single harmonious consciousness. These were not her thoughts. They were not her memories. One night, as she sat lost in this strange telepathic reverie, she felt a distinct, focused sensation. It was not a random echo of a memory, but a direct question, formed not of words, but of a feeling, "Why are you alone?" Anita's eyes snapped open. Her heart was pounding. The lagoon was glowing more brightly than she had ever seen it, and the deep, sonorous whisper seemed to surround her, resonating in her chest. The being below was not just sleeping, it was dreaming. And now, she knew she was listening. The question hung in the cool, misty air, a profound and intimate inquiry that bypassed her ears and settled directly in her soul. Anita's scientific detachment shattered, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated awe. She wasn't studying a specimen, she was in the presence of a mind, ancient and vast. Hesitantly, not knowing if it would work, she focused her own thoughts, projecting them towards the glowing water. "I am not always alone," she thought, picturing her small lab, her distant colleagues, the bustling city she had left behind for this research. But here, yes, here I am alone. A feeling of serene understanding flowed back from the lagoon, a sense of empathy that was as warm and gentle as the water itself. Then came a new series of images, clearer and more deliberate than the dreamlike fragments from before. She saw the creature, whose name she felt was the Weaver, not in the lagoon, but in the deep, star-dusted void between worlds. She saw it traveling not in a vessel of metal, but as part of a great silent migration of similar beings, moving through space like a cosmic pod of whales. They were explorers, archivists, and gardeners, seeding life and collecting memories from across the galaxy. She saw the moment the Weaver arrived at Earth millennia ago. It was not a crash, but an intentional descent. It had chosen this specific place, sensing the unique geothermal warmth and the purity of the subterranean springs. It was a place of rest, a sanctuary for a long and deep period of hibernation, a time for it to process the countless ages of memories it had gathered. The communication was slow,
patient, a gentle exchange of concepts. Anita learned that the weaver was not trapped or wounded, it was simply resting. But its long slumber was nearing its end. The subtle geological shifts of a planet, the changing magnetic fields, and even the distant, growing hum of human civilization were acting as a slow, persistent alarm clock. A new feeling reached her, one that was tinged with a subtle sense of need. The weaver showed her an image of the lagoon's water, but on a microscopic level. She saw the unique bioluminescent algae, and she saw how the weaver's own cells, shed over centuries, had intertwined with them, creating their unique symbiotic glow. But the image was flawed. A foreign element was present, a tiny, almost invisible chemical impurity that was beginning to disrupt the delicate balance. It was a modern pollutant, something that had seeped into the groundwater from a source miles away, a ghost of human industry. It was not toxic enough to kill, but it was enough to interfere with the final delicate stages of the weaver's awakening. "The water is clouded," the weaver projected, the feeling one of a dream turning slightly sour. "The light is not pure." Anita understood. The creature wasn't asking for a rescue. It was asking for a cure. It needed her help to restore the sanctuary so that it could awaken fully and continue its ancient journey. She was no longer just a witness to a great secret. She was being asked to become its caretaker. Her small, isolated research project had just become the most important conservation effort in the history of the world. Accepting the role of caretaker for a hibernating alien entity was not something covered in any of Anita's university textbooks. There was no protocol, no peer-reviewed paper to consult. There was only the quiet, humming presence in the lagoon and the clear, undeniable sense of a task bestowed upon her. The feeling was not one of pressure, but of profound privilege. Her first step was to approach the problem as a scientist. She spent the next 2 days working with a quiet, intense focus. She took water samples, not just from the lagoon, but from the surrounding streams and groundwater wells, creating a detailed hydrological map of the area. She set up a makeshift lab in her small cabin, running tests, analyzing the data, her mind a flurry of chemical equations and environmental science. The culprit, when she found it, was a subtle but persistent trace of a complex industrial solvent. It was a chemical that had been banned for years, but was known for its longevity in the soil. It was tasteless, odorless, and invisible. Using geological surveys and old county maps, she traced the likely source to a long-abandoned lumber mill located 3 miles upstream from the lagoon's subterranean water source. The mill had been a ruin for a half-century, a skeleton of rotting wood and rusting metal, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. But its legacy was a silent chemical ghost, slowly poisoning the pure water the weaver had chosen for its rest. The solution was not simple. Cleaning a contaminated aquifer was a monumental task, something that required teams of engineers and millions of dollars. She could report it, of course. An anonymous tip to the Environmental Protection Agency would eventually lead to an investigation, but that would take years, and it would bring official attention, surveyors, and eventually the very discovery she was trying to prevent. As she wrestled with this impossible problem, a new, unsettling feeling began to creep into her solitude. It was the distinct, primal sensation of being watched. While collecting samples by a stream, she would catch a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision, only to see nothing when she turned. One morning, she found a single, perfectly straight branch laid across her path, a classic trail marker used by woodsmen in a place she had never seen another human footprint. The confirmation came on the 3rd day. She was reviewing satellite images of the area on her laptop, trying to map the old mill's drainage basin, when she decided to look at the most recent public domain image of her own location. Her heart went cold. In the high-resolution photo taken just 2 days prior, her own small cabin and the lagoon were clearly visible, and on a nearby logging road, almost completely hidden by the dense canopy of trees, was the unmistakable shape of a dark, unmarked van with a sophisticated sensor array on its roof. They were here. They hadn't found the lagoon yet, but they were close. They were sweeping the forest, likely drawn by the same subtle energy signatures her own equipment had detected. The slow, gentle awakening of the Weaver was no longer a secret between her and the ancient being. It was now a race against a silent, unseen, and technologically superior pursuer. The time for quiet analysis was over. She had to find a way to heal the water, and she had to do it now, before the men in the van found their way to the Glimmerwood.
The satellite image was a cold, hard knot of dread in Anita's stomach. The abstract fear of being watched had solidified into a tangible threat, a dark van on a lonely road. Every rustle of leaves outside her cabin, every snap of a twig, now sounded like an approaching footstep. Her sanctuary had become a cage, and she felt the unseen eyes of the watchers constantly upon her. Panic was a useless luxury. She had to act. She couldn't call the authorities, she couldn't hire a cleanup crew, and she couldn't leave. There was only one source of knowledge, one ally she could turn to. That night, she went to the edge of the lagoon, the Glimmerwood a silent, shimmering confederate in the darkness. She didn't use her equipment, she simply sat on the mossy ground, closed her eyes, and reached out with her mind. They are here, she projected, a feeling of cold fear and urgency. She sent the mental image of the van, the sense of being hunted. I cannot fix the water in time. I don't know how. The response from the Weaver was slow, calm, and incredibly ancient. It was a feeling of reassurance, a vast, quiet mind acknowledging her fear, but not sharing it. Then a new stream of information began to flow into her, a gift of biological knowledge that was profoundly alien and yet perfectly elegant. The Weaver showed her the pollutant, not as a chemical formula, but as a complex geometric structure. Then it showed her another structure, a living, microscopic one. It was a unique extremophilic bacterium, a life form she had never seen before. In the vision, she saw these bacteria swarming the pollutant molecules, breaking them down, consuming them, and converting them into a harmless, inert substance. It was a perfect biological solution. A map formed in her mind, a detailed, three-dimensional image of the forest. The Weaver guided her awareness to a specific location. A small, hidden network of geothermal caves tucked away in the deepest, most inaccessible part of the woods, a place where the Earth's inner warmth bled to the surface. It was there, and only there, living in the sulfur-scented steam and mineral-rich water, that this specific bacterium could be found. "Bring the life that cleans," the Weaver communicated. Its message a simple, clear directive. Introduce it to the source of the spring. The water will carry it here. A desperate, fragile hope bloomed in Anita's chest. It was a plan, a dangerous, insane plan that involved a journey into the deepest part of a forest that was actively being surveilled by unknown government agents, but it was a plan. She would not be a passive victim, waiting to be discovered. She would become an active participant in the planet's most profound secret. She spent the next hour gathering what she needed: sterile sample containers, a headlamp, rope, and a GPS unit loaded with the mental map the Weaver had given her. She would leave before dawn, moving under the cover of the morning mist. As she prepared, she felt the deep, steady pulse of the lagoon at her back, a silent, powerful ally. She was its hands, its feet, its agent in the world of solid ground and open air. And it, in turn, was her guardian, its ancient mind a compass guiding her through the encroaching darkness. Moving through the forest before dawn was like swimming through an ocean of ink. A thick, damp mist clung to the ground, swallowing sound and reducing the world to a few feet of ghostly visibility. For Anita, it was the perfect cover. She moved with a silent, deliberate grace she didn't know she possessed. Her path guided not by the glowing screen of her GPS, but by the calm, unwavering map in her mind, a gift from the Weaver. The geothermal caves were in a part of the forest that was marked on maps as swampland, a place people naturally avoided. The journey was arduous. She waded through waist-deep stagnant water and navigated treacherous terrain of tangled roots and slick, moss-covered stones. To her heightened senses, the forest felt alive with a tense, nervous energy. She could feel the sharp static of the watch's technology, a faint but persistent network of sensors and cameras that she carefully, painstakingly detoured around, a process that turned a 2-mile journey into a 5-mile ordeal. After hours of tense, silent trekking, the air began to change. The damp, earthy smell of the forest was replaced by the distinct, sharp scent of sulfur, and the ground beneath her boots grew warm. Steam rose in ghostly tendrils from cracks in the rock. She had found it. The entrance was a narrow fissure, almost completely hidden by a curtain of hanging ferns, exhaling a plume of warm, moist air. She slipped into the fissure and descended into the earth's warmth. The caves were a stunning natural wonder. The walls were lined with delicate, crystalline mineral deposits that glittered in the beam of her headlamp, and the air was thick with a warm, sulfurous steam. A stream of geothermally heated water, the lifeblood of this hidden ecosystem, flowed through the center of the main cavern. Following the Weaver's guidance, she approached a series of small, steaming pools along the edge of the stream. The vision had been precise. She knew exactly what to look for. In one specific pool, clinging to the rust-colored mineral deposits just below the water's surface, was a thin, gelatinous, deep blue film. It was the bacteria, a living culture, thriving in the perfect, unique conditions of this subterranean hothouse. With a sense of profound reverence, she opened her sterile containers and carefully collected several samples of the rich, blue culture and the warm, mineral-heavy water it lived in. As she sealed the final container, she felt a wave of what could only be described as pure, serene joy from the Weaver. It was a feeling of a thirsty person finally receiving a sip of clean water. The lost piece of the puzzle had been found. She had the cure. Now came the most dangerous part of the plan. She didn't just have to get back to the lagoon. She had to get to the subterranean spring that fed it, a location much closer to where she had seen the van, and introduce the bacteria there. She would be walking directly into the heart of the Watcher's territory, carrying a biological sample unlike anything on Earth. As she climbed out of the warm, life-giving darkness of the caves and back into the cold, misty forest, she knew the quiet, observational phase of this encounter was over. She was now an active agent in a secret war, and the stakes were the awakening of a god.
The journey to the spring was a slow, agonizing crawl through a tightening net. The sun had risen, but the dense canopy and the lingering fog created a perpetual twilight, a world of shifting shadows and muffled sounds. The map in Anita's mind was clear, guiding her towards a small, unremarkable clearing where the pure, cold water that fed the Glimmerwood bubbled up from deep within the earth. But this mental map was now overlaid with the sharp, prickling static of the Watcher's surveillance grid, which was far more concentrated here. They knew this spring was a key location, even if they didn't know why. She moved in a state of heightened, almost painful awareness. She could feel the invisible beams of motion sensors, the electric hum of hidden cameras, the faint warmth of buried power lines. Each one was a threat she had to painstakingly navigate around, sometimes spending 20 minutes to move 30 feet. The Weaver's consciousness was a constant, calming presence, a silent co-navigator in this deadly game. It couldn't disable the technology without revealing its own presence, but it could guide her through the gaps in the web. After hours that felt like days, she reached the edge of the clearing. It was a small, deceptively peaceful place, a circle of lush green moss and ferns, with the spring itself bubbling gently from a fissure in a moss-covered rock. It looked utterly pristine. but she could feel the watcher's presence. From a concealed position behind a massive fallen log, she scanned the area. She saw nothing, but her new senses told her they were there. A sniper's nest, perfectly camouflaged in the high branches of a cedar tree. A listening post, buried beneath a pile of dead leaves. They were dug in, patient, waiting for something to happen. She couldn't just walk into the clearing. She would be seen in seconds. Panic began to rise in her throat, cold and sharp. She clutched the containers in her pack, the living cure for a sleeping god, and felt a wave of despair. She was trapped. "Wait for the shadow," the Weaver whispered in her mind, the message accompanied by a feeling of deep, unhurried calm. Anita didn't understand, but she trusted. She remained hidden, her body aching from the strain, and she waited. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and then she saw it. A massive, solitary cloud, a type she had never seen before, was moving against the prevailing winds, its path slow but deliberate, as if being guided by an unseen hand. It moved directly over the clearing, and its shadow fell like a thick, gray blanket, plunging the area into a deep, sudden gloom. At the exact same moment, a distraction, a large black bear, bigger than any she had ever seen in this forest, ambled out into the logging road a quarter-mile away, directly in front of where she knew the van was parked. It stopped, rose on its hind legs, and let out a deafening roar. It was a perfectly orchestrated diversion. The watchers' attention, their cameras, their focus, everything would be momentarily shifted to the massive, unexpected threat of the bear. The deep shadow of the cloud would obscure their vision into the clearing for a few precious seconds. It was her only chance. "Go now," the Weaver urged. Anita didn't hesitate. She broke from cover, sprinting across the mossy ground. She reached the spring, her hands shaking as she opened the containers. She poured the vibrant blue culture directly into the source, watching as the living cure was instantly carried down into the earth. Her mission was complete. As she turned to run back to the safety of the trees, she heard a sharp, metallic click from the high branches of the cedar tree. The sniper had seen her. The shadow was passing. Time was up. The metallic click was a sound that would forever be seared into Anita's memory, a tiny, chilling punctuation mark to the end of her mission, and quite possibly, her freedom. She didn't wait for the shot. Guided by a surge of pure, primal adrenaline, she plunged headfirst into a dense thicket of blackberry bushes, thorns tearing at her skin and clothes. The Weaver's consciousness, which had been a calm navigator, now pulsed with intense urgency, urging her deeper into the thicket towards a barely visible game trail that twisted through the impenetrable undergrowth. She scrambled through the thorny maze, ignoring the pain, her only thought to put as much distance and concealment between herself and the sniper as possible. She could hear shouts now, the agitated voices of men moving through the forest, coordinating their pursuit. The cover of the cloud had passed. The bear diversion had run its course, and she was exposed. The hunters were closing in. As she burst out of the thicket, gasping for breath, she found herself on the edge of a steep, rocky ravine, a place of sheer drops and unstable scree. It was a natural barrier, a last resort. Below her, the ravine floor was a jumble of jagged boulders and dark shadows. "Go down," the Weaver projected, not as a command, but as a path shown in her mind, a detailed route through the treacherous terrain that seemed impossibly safe. Without hesitation, Anita began her descent. She slid, climbed, and leapt, her body moving with an unnatural agility. The footing was precarious, every rock a potential trap, but she placed her feet exactly where the mental map showed her, finding hidden handholds and stable ledges that no human eye would have discerned in the low light. It seemed as if the mountain itself was guiding her, lending her strength and knowledge. The pursuers, less agile and hampered by their heavy gear, were struggling above. She could hear their frustrated shouts, the clatter of loose rocks as they tried to follow, but she was faster, lighter, almost flying down the treacherous slope. Midway down the ravine, she felt a profound surge of energy from the weaver, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated through the very stones of the ravine. Above her, a loud cracking sound echoed through the canyon. She glanced up. A massive section of the ravine wall, directly above the path her pursuers were taking, was beginning to give way. It was not a violent explosion, but a slow, deliberate fracture, orchestrated with terrifying precision. Giant boulders detached themselves from the cliff face, tumbling down the ravine, blocking the path with a roar of displaced rock and dust. The pursuit stopped cold. She heard cries of alarm, the frantic shouts of men now trapped and separated by a rock slide. The weaver had not harmed them, but it had effectively sealed them off, buying her precious time. She reached the bottom of the ravine, her body bruised and scraped, but exhilarated. She was free, for now. She looked back up at the impassable wall of newly fallen rock, a silent testament to the alien entity's power and its unwavering protection. The weaver was not just an archivist of memories, it was a force of nature, capable of reshaping the landscape to defend its chosen caretaker. As she made her way out of the ravine and back into the deeper, quieter parts of the forest, she felt a wave of profound gratitude from the weaver. The cure flows now, it communicated, a deep sense of peace accompanying the words. The balance is restored. The awakening will be pure. Anita felt a new sense of calm wash over her, a deep and quiet victory. The water was healing. The weaver was safe. And for the first time in days, she felt a true sense of hope.
The forest felt different on the long walk back. The tense, watchful silence of the hunters had been replaced by a deep, resonant peace. The air itself seemed cleaner, charged with a new and vibrant energy. Anita could feel the change in her very bones. The cure was working. The living bacteria, carried by the pure water of the spring, were flowing towards the lagoon, a microscopic army of healers restoring the ancient sanctuary. When she finally reached the Glimmerwood, the transformation was breathtaking. The lagoon was no longer just glowing, it was radiant. The soft emerald light had intensified into a brilliant, multifaceted aquamarine, pulsing with a slow, powerful, and perfectly steady rhythm. The water was now crystal clear, and for the first time she could see the full, unobscured form of the weaver resting peacefully at the bottom. It was a being of impossible grace and scale, its dark, patterned skin now shimmering with its own internal silver light. Anita sank to her knees on the mossy bank, overwhelmed by a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. She had done it. She had fulfilled her promise. A sense of profound gratitude flowed from the weaver, a feeling so immense and all-encompassing it felt like a warm embrace from the planet itself. The water is pure. The weaver's thoughts echoed in her mind, clearer and more powerful than ever before. The final sleep is over. The awakening begins. As if in response to these words, the rhythm of the light began to change. The steady pulse quickened, and the colors began to shift, cycling through a spectrum of deep violets, brilliant golds, and soft pinks. The water of the lagoon began to swirl slowly, forming a gentle, silent vortex in the center, directly above the weaver. The very air around her grew thick with a tangible electric energy. Anita was no longer a scientist or a caretaker. She was a witness to a miracle. She was watching a being born or reborn from a slumber that had lasted longer than all of human history. The whisper from the deep was no longer a whisper.
It was a song, a complex, multi-layered harmony that resonated not in her ears, but in every cell of her body. It was a song of starlight and ocean depths, of time and memory, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever experienced. The light from the lagoon grew so intense that it projected a massive, shimmering column of soft, multicolored light into the night sky, a silent, beautiful beacon piercing the canopy of the ancient forest. It was an announcement not of aggression, but of serene, powerful presence. It was a declaration to the universe that a long journey was about to resume. Anita watched, tears streaming down her face as the light and the song swelled to a final glorious crescendo. The time for hiding was over. The time for dreaming was done. The weaver was awake. The column of light pulsed one final time, a silent cosmic exhale, and then began to slowly, gracefully recede. The intense, multicolored radiance of the lagoon softened, settling back into a deep, vibrant aquamarine, a color that seemed to hum with newly awakened life. The song that had filled Anita's being also receded, leaving behind a profound sense of peace and a deep, resonant hum that was now a permanent part of her consciousness. "Thank you, caretaker," the weaver projected, its thoughts now clear and distinct in her mind, a voice made of starlight and ocean currents. "The journey may continue. The archive is full. The path is clear." Anita, still kneeling, looked at the majestic form of the weaver, now gently stirring at the bottom of the lagoon. It was beginning to move, not with the abruptness of waking, but with the fluid grace of something immensely powerful and ancient. Its vast body slowly rotated, its patterned skin shimmering. "Will you leave?" Anita projected, a pang of sadness in her heart. "We are always moving," the weaver answered, the thought gentle. "To linger is to stop the flow of knowledge. But we do not truly leave. This place, this world, these memories, they are now a part of me, as I am now a part of you." A final soft surge of energy flowed from the weaver directly into Anita. It was not a physical touch, but a profound infusion of knowledge and understanding. She felt the weight of cosmic loneliness, the vastness of the universe, and the quiet joy of discovery. She felt a connection to something immense, something ancient, something that had cradled her small world in its vast dreams for millennia. She understood that the weaver was not just an individual. It was a fragment of a larger galactic consciousness, a mobile library of life and experience. As the sun began to paint the eastern sky with the first soft hues of dawn, the weaver began its departure. The water of the lagoon stirred, not with turbulence, but with a controlled, powerful current. The enormous entity rose slowly from the sandy bottom, shedding the last vestiges of its long slumber. It was even grander than she had imagined, a leviathan of living light and complex organic technology. It did not break the surface of the water. Instead, as it reached the top, the water itself seemed to part for it, forming a shimmering, temporary tunnel of light. With an ethereal grace, the weaver flowed upwards, not into the air, but into the very fabric of the forest canopy, its light dissolving into the rising mist and the first rays of the sun. It was gone, not with a roar or a blast, but with a silent, beautiful vanish. The column of light it had projected into the night sky was gone, leaving only the soft, morning light. Anita stood alone on the bank of the Glimmerwood. The lagoon was still, its water now a natural, pristine blue, the bioluminescent algae having completed their role, their light fading with the dawn. The only trace of the weaver was the deep, resonant hum that now resided within Anita herself, a constant, comforting presence, a private connection to the boundless universe. The men in the dark van, drawn by the incredible light show, would arrive eventually. They would find an empty lagoon, purified water, and a young woman changed forever. They would have questions, theories, accusations, but they would never find the weaver, and they would never truly understand the silent, cosmic secret that now resided, not in the depths of a hidden lagoon, but in the quiet, expanded heart of Dr. Anita Sharma. She was no longer just a marine biologist. She was a witness, a caretaker, and a living echo of the whisper from the hidden lagoon, forever connected to the stars.